Bringing classic gameplay back to life is a double-edged sword. While many games over the years have borrowed the tried-and-true mechanics of Metroidvania classics, Valdis' story is one that does so while also recreating the aesthetic of the old-school consoles. Its colorful art style would feel right at home on a PlayStation 1. The hours of engaging gameplay at hand will especially satisfy the nostalgic. But beware, Valdis' story is not for the faint of heart. You begin the game as Wyatt, the leader of a crew who is fighting to bring balance to a war between angels and demons. Wyatt is searching for his father before a battle gone wrong separates him from the rest of his crew and the player's adventure ensues. The story accompanying the 10 to 15 hour playthrough is as substantial as it is intriguing. Through communication with townsfolk, you learn of the dark goddess Mirgado and how she killed her mother Valdis, the ruler of all. A great struggle over control of the world has since resulted between Mirgado and her twin sister Alagath, the goddess of light. What seems like an obvious setting of light versus dark is not so cut and dried in Valdis' story. Both goddesses are thirsty for power, and each requires human souls to populate her army. Wyatt and his crew are caught in the middle. With no good side to pick, they simply want the war to end. There's a good bit of dialogue to sift through, but those that stick with it will be rewarded with an engrossing universe that could house any number of titles to follow. As with his classic inspirations, the bulk of the gameplay in Valdis' story is spent battling enemies and exploring side-scrolling landscapes. The satisfaction of a good Metroidvania game is intact. You'll come across many inaccessible doors and return to them hours later with a means of entry, filled with anticipation of what could be behind them. The location of your next task is not always obvious, with a vague line of text serving as the only clue. This lack of hand-holding might frustrate in other games, but it's a boon to Valdis' story, as revisiting areas to more thoroughly explore only enhances the whole. Experience is earned through defeating enemies, with a substantial amount of unlockable skills and stat upgrades to choose from as each new player level is achieved. There's even somewhat of a crafting mechanic. Materials collected in the wild can be provided to vendors to increase the effectiveness of armor and weapons, or create new ones outright. The combat in Valdis' story is its apogee. Stringing together combos with the aid of unlocked skills is enchanting from start to finish. Magic plays a major part, serving as a gratifying complement to melee swordplay. By the game's conclusion, you'll have access to a generous amount of spells ranging from elemental attacks to stat buffs to abilities that help you reach otherwise inaccessible areas. The depth of combat comes to light most effectively while entrenched in the numerous boss fights. Some of these tests are quite stiff, particularly later in the game. Success comes through experimentation, practicing different spells and different bosses, and even exploring the area where the battle takes place. But if nothing's working out, doubling back for some old-fashioned level grinding goes a long way. Valdis' story is finishable well before the unlockable skill tree is exhausted. Between this and the multiple skill levels, along with the option to play as other characters with noticeably different playstyles, there is a hefty amount of replay value. But where Valdis' story shines in its exploration, progression, and combat, it occasionally falters in its platforming. Jumping has an uneasy float to it, and grabbing onto ledges can feel imprecise at times. These issues don't hinder the experience until you happen upon the several areas with maddeningly demanding platforming sequences. This is where the throwback style comes back to haunt, and developer Endless Fluff too often channels the sadism of old. Littered throughout are time trial-esque sections. Often you'll hit a switch and you're given a number of seconds to reach an area before a door closes. Other times you'll have to escape a cavern before it collapses. It's these areas where the platforming problems are most prevalent. In order to succeed, each jump and dash must be performed flawlessly. One misstep and you're starting over. It's occasionally rage quit material. The controls themselves contribute to frustration. Valdis' story is best played with a gamepad, but the default layout of a couple of often used commands is peculiar. While in a battle and alternating quickly between blocking and casting spells, it's far too easy to accidentally launch the spell preset menu, a frustrating distraction. The dash ability is a bigger problem, as it is paramount to succeeding in all but the easiest battles in the game. Valdis' story tasks the player with pressing down on the D-pad, followed by a direction to dash, left or right. A Street Fighter-style Hadouken movement will pull it off, but as the more difficult battles require precise execution, it's puzzling that the maneuver can't be bound to a single button. The platforming and control issues wouldn't be so pronounced were it not for the fact that Valdis' story is quite difficult. Before you've managed to adapt to the floaty platforming and odd control scheme, this game can be extremely frustrating. You'd do well to resist the urge to throw your controller and instead give it another go. Valdis' story makes you earn your progress, and that makes success all the more satisfying. Reviving the gameplay of classics is dangerous. Too often our memories betray us, forgetting the problems that game development has overcome over the years. But while playing to our nostalgic whims, Valdis' story still manages to feel new, and it builds a universe that deserves to live on in future titles. Fans of the genre should take note with reservations. You're going to be frustrated, but it's worth the fight.